I think it's important to focus on strategies long term. Welcome to all of you who are new here. I see a lot of familiar faces who, those of you who are already familiar with RIE, but we host these town halls weekly. Sometimes we have a speaker on, sometimes we just have open forums or Montessori marketing sessions. But this is a space for Montessori leaders to come together. It's always free. We think that you guys should have a space to connect without interference from parents or staff and just talk about leadership. So I'd love to know how many of you are struggling with retention now. You can comment in the chat. Yes, you can raise your hand.
We're a small enough group today that you can just unmute yourselves too.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself, you can speak up, but is this a struggle for you at this given moment? Are you having issues with re-enrollment? Are you having issues with maybe getting people to come into your school, and then also just retention in general?
Wally, I saw you unmuted yourself. Did you have something?
Yeah, I was just waiting for Camilla to finish, but I just want to mention that we haven't had issues with retention per se for the students. What we have done is, by design, we have reduced our enrollment and our normal enrollment because of creating pods and also making sure that the additional demands the teachers have can be met easier with smaller number of students. So we haven't had that. Now we're just starting our enrollment for 22-23 academic year. So in the next couple of months, we'll see how that kind of, right now it looks pretty good. So but that has not been really much of an issue. The main issue has been to make sure that staff members maintain their sanity.
Yeah. All right, so let's focus in, I guess, on the issue of the pandemic and its role in retention, if it has been a struggle for your school. Just some conversation starters I put here. Are parents reacting negatively towards restrictions? Has anyone experienced that? I know each state kind of has its own restrictions, but has there been any pushback?
A lot, Camilla. I mean,
Yeah.
that has been, I mean, we have basically one person almost full-time dealing with these issues with the COVID requirements and pushbacks and trying to respond to them, people asking all kinds of questions. So that has been a major issue. We just, last week, we had a survey done for the parents because they are finding our regulations extremely, the protocols very restrictive. So now I think, given the situation, I think everywhere else in the nation, what is going on, we just we're trying to figure out whether or not test to stay rather than closing the classroom would be an option that the parents would prefer. So we won't close the classroom, but the child who has an issue will quarantine, and those who are healthy will just test to make sure they are fine and they can continue. So there was an overwhelming support for that. So we just changed that, but that has been a real issue and struggle for us, because I mean, I understand the frustration of the parents, especially those who are working families. I mean, members of the working family. It's very hard for them. I totally understand that. At the same time, I think we have essentially to ensure the safety of the class, the school, and the children. And so it's been the balancing act for which there is really no, it doesn't seem like there's a good happy medium.
Yeah, no, I think you're not alone in feeling that way. I'd love to hear if anyone else is experiencing the same issues with restrictions and just parents reacting negatively, if that's happened at your school. Hopefully not. Also, I guess with restrictions comes the need for constant changes in protocol and maybe classroom sizes. Maybe you have to update parents a lot if you have to close a classroom down or if there's a positive case. Has it been difficult to communicate with your families? Have they been reactive when a classroom has to close? How do they respond? Has there been any threats of leaving the school? I see cases here and there when I'm in some forums online, but I'd love to hear your experiences and kind of how you have been able to turn those situations around, if you have been able to.
I would imagine a lot of what goes through a parent's mind is what, if they have a frustration with how your school is handling certain policies, then they might look around and see what other options there are, but it probably depends a lot on what the other options are and what their policies are, because everybody is dealing with this. And to me, it seems like communicating that you're doing the best you can under really, really difficult circumstances would be key here. But anyway, just some thoughts around that just, you know, if parents are super frustrated, then they might be looking around, and obviously that would affect retention if they think, you know, maybe they have this sort of the grass is always greener kind of mentality and looking around, but maybe not. I'd be curious to hear if any of you have experienced that, and where you might be losing students to another school that has different types of policies in place.
We haven't lost any yet, but and I know for a fact that there are a few parents who may be looking around for next year. If we continue the same policy, they probably will go elsewhere. One parent has specifically mentioned that if you guys have the same policy, we are going to try to find a different school. And also in our area, both Montessori schools and non-Montessori schools, they have different policies, as you mentioned yourself, Camille. Some of them never close. Some of them have very flexible mask policy. Some of them just kind of, I mean, it's a lot easier for them. So it's attractive for parents who are in bind, even though that may not be the first choice, but they might take their option moving forward if we are very restrictive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So hopefully they're writing this out a little bit. And I know, I mean, Camilla mentioned at the start of our meeting today that, you know, we're all hoping that we're starting to see a light at the end of this tunnel, and that, you know, hopefully next year we'll be not having to deal with such strict restrictions, and then maybe parents will be less reactive to that. So anyway.
Yes.
The way, Camille, that's what we said last fall. We said the same thing, that hopefully then this year will be much, this year has been much worse than the previous year, us at least. So hopefully that won't repeat.
Yeah. Another kind of issue that I wanted to talk about when it comes to retention, because I know that in the Montessori space, especially, one of the things that is so great is that students can get familiar with their teacher, usually for at least 3 years. They get familiar with the staff there. But with the pandemic, there has been a lot of burnout. Staffing retention has been really difficult for a lot of schools. Schools have lost teachers. They're retiring early. They're just kind of, you know, exhausted. Has this harmed your retention, kind of shakeups in the staffing? Has anyone noticed this in their community? How are they approaching solutions? If not, then great. if you've managed to keep a hold of your staff through this, that's really great. All right. I just want to ask before we move on from the issue of the pandemic alone when it comes to retention, are there any other issues that you have noticed kind of building up through the past 2 years that have really harmed retention, or just made it harder for your school to keep a hold of students or even attract new students? You can drop it in the chat or unmute yourself.
Yeah, so that.
Camilla, can you repeat your question?
No, I just wanted to ask if there are any other issues that the pandemic has brought forth when it comes to operating your school or just keeping a hold of families, keeping them engaged in your
Nice.
school community. All right. If anything comes to mind, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll move on to the next kind of topic when it comes to retention. And that's parent education, which is a huge, it plays a huge role in retention, specifically in the Montessori space, because Montessori is not traditional schooling. It requires kind of for parents to have some sense of the philosophy and understanding of Montessori principles. So firstly, do you feel that your school offers enough resources to educate families on Montessori? And not just Montessori, but on parenting as well, because I think it's one thing to show parents around the classroom and have them observe, but also just giving them parenting advice. I'd love to hear what schools are doing to support parents.
One thing I will say is that the bandwidth this year for doing these events is low. And so I've appreciated the partnership with Thrive to be able to offer some family events. It's kind of to go along with what we're able to offer. It is very challenging because we're not in person in these events yet. So doing them via Zoom when people are already Zoomed out is challenging. And really driving home the beauty of the pink tower on Zoom is just not there, right? It's not the same. So I don't think the past 2 years or since the pandemic has been in play that our school in particular has been able to offer enough of those Montessori. And so as a result, I find we're spending a lot of our time trying to convince parents one by one, because we're not having this wonderful event. Like we haven't had a silent journey in 2 years. Silent journey is the magic of Montessori, right? You work hard, it is a phenomenal, and then your parents are sold, right? But to not have had the opportunity to do that has been very challenging. So the staff was glad when they saw it back on the calendar for this year, but I do agree that parent education goes right along with retention, and there's definitely a need for that, for sure.
So Emily, are you having a parent silent journey this spring sometime then?
No, in the fall.
Next fall, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So right now it's still just those sidebar conversations with families, giving them that little impromptu. I know she's polishing, and every time you see a picture of her, she's polishing, but just remember, but it's so much harder to do that person by person rather than have an event that speaks to why do children polish, the wonder of practical life. How does that, connect to all those other magical pieces of Montessori? So yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel bad asking staff to do one more thing. They are working hard to keep their feet moving in a pandemic. That takes an exhausting amount of energy every single day. And we've been doing it for a long time. And those of us who are trying to fill in for people who have walked away from it all, it's a lot. It's a lot. So I do think the parent education just needs to be like top notch next year for every Montessori school to get us back to the business of Montessori. I really do.
That would be a great resource for us to have on Thrive too, is maybe some, we have these things called the one-pagers, which are basically, a one-page answer to frequently asked questions, and maybe, taking a survey of what is the question. And it doesn't replace the one-on-one conversation, I know that, but it could be something that, when you have those conversations, you can, hey, and here's, something you can hand them to read about why do we do practical life in Children's House, for example, or, so maybe just as Camilla and I brainstorming here about what else can we put that will help you all with communicating with parents and parent ed, because that is a big piece of everything here. So.
Yeah, the resources are amazing. We don't tell you all that enough, but they truly, truly are. So thank you.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that, Emily. I think you're 100% right in everything you said. I think it's been extremely challenging to deliver the same quality of parent education that we were able to before the pandemic. And hopefully things will turn around come fall. The magic really comes from seeing the classrooms, being in the environment. So hopefully there is a light at the end of this tunnel. But thank you so much for sharing your experience. Yeah, I think it will definitely resonate with a lot of other school leaders. If there are any resources that that any of you guys need on Thrive that you would like more of for parenting education support, please do place a request. We do have some specifically designed for retention as well, mostly for that the finishing of the 3-year cycle, things like that. That's usually the more challenging aspects of retention in the Montessori space. But please let us know if there's something that you don't see or that you would like. We're happy to help in sourcing and producing that resource for you. All right. Another thing that I want to ask is, does your school ask for any family commitments? I know some schools, they make parents sign a 3-year commitment form or saying, I will keep my child in for the full 3 years, or they offer some type of discount, something like putting down a deposit that they get back if their child ends up spending the 3rd year with them. Does anyone do something that has ended up working in their community?
Well, we don't do that. I mean, I think it's a luxury that at this point, I'm not sure if you can afford it. When you have a long waiting queue of students trying to get in, you can be a lot more judicious about what you do and what you require of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we haven't been doing that. The other thing is that in terms of even the sign something, and the chances are they probably, if they need to go, they'll go, and you're not going to do anything about it. I mean, that's basically that's the way it is. Mm-hmm. So we haven't been doing it, and the main challenge I think we have is to educate the parents once they join us that this is not a daycare, but it's actually a school with specific curriculum and a specific philosophy. And I feel that probably will go, even if somebody came in saying that, hey, I'm just going to use this as daycare, if you educate them properly, chances are that they might get converted. And I mean, I have to confess, we just don't do enough of that, in a sense that marketing and getting them in the door is one thing, but while they're there, to continuously educate them to the value of the uniqueness of the value that we provide will basically convince them to stay for 3 years in primary and to even go to elementary, despite the fact that you might have good private schools in your area. And we just don't do enough because of the resources. I mean, we just don't have enough resources to dedicate to that. Our concern is this, that teachers feel that they're doing a lot already. To ask them to do more, for example, I think I mean, in terms of silent journey, I'm glad that that Emily does it on a regular basis, but we have done it a few times and it has been very well received. But the thing we have been thinking about doing is over the weekend, and to ask the teacher to dedicate a weekend to come in and do that. I think some schools do that over a weekend, and we were thinking about that. So that would be another burden that we'll be placing on the teachers. So we basically backed off that. We just have what we call parent night for a few of them over the years, which is helpful. But it'd be nice to have silent journey. I think I totally see the value of that. It's just a matter of resource. Now, to respond to you, Camille, in terms of what would be helpful is that even like, for example, parent night and all that, if we have some short presentations, like slide presentations, that hit basically some of the key issues of why they should complete 3 years, what is unique about elementary that you should consider, and things like that. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that we can say, if we had like a few slides that that we could basically use during the parent night, that'd be very helpful. Because let's I mean, be honest. I mean, all our teachers are not really marketing people. I mean, they don't always know what the right words are to use, how to put it, and they're not marketeers, right? So, I mean, they know their subject very well, and some of them are not very good speakers and get nervous in front of the parents. So if they have something like crutch they can use in terms of presentation and slides, that would be very helpful.
Wally, we do have slides for retention, specifically presentation slides for parents for the going into the third year, going to the kindergarten year. We can definitely create a few for the elementary program as well, if that will be helpful. If you would like, I can send you the link via email after the meeting so you can review them. That way you can use them, your teachers can use them. We also, if you're concerned about, asking too much of your staff, an easy way to educate parents from a marketing standpoint is using an email nurture. We have templates for that as well on Thrive that are already written. All you have to do is go in and add your school's information. But I think it's a 5 email nurture to help the transition from to kindergarten year, and also to elementary, and then to from lower elementary to upper elementary. So we have nurturers for all of those. So I can send this to you as well, Wally, because I think that might help you, and it shouldn't take time and energy from your staff.
Yeah, I have now one staff who's dedicating herself a lot to admissions and retention, things like that. So I will basically have her be the point person. And I've asked her already to go to Thrive and find out what resources exist so that we can take advantage of that.
Yeah, we have a couple of resources on retention, and I see Emily wants some as well. I will be happy to share those with you. They're in our collection. We actually have a whole section called retention. If there's something that you don't see there that you would like, please request it. We can certainly do a presentation dedicated to elementary. I think that's a great one to add. Just because the biggest ask is usually for that kindergarten year. We have that one already. And we have a few parenting education slides for toddler primary as well. If your teachers just don't have the time or energy to create a presentation, like you said, Wally, it's not their job necessarily to do that. Their job is to be teachers in the classroom. So we've done that for you to save time and energy. So I'll send you both some of the retention resources we have for you guys to review for your school. And like I said, if you ever want something that's on the collection, please place a request, because we're always looking to grow our collection. And the best way to grow it effectively is by leaders telling us what they'd like to see. Because then if you want to see it, there's probably another school leader who wants it as well. That's great. Thank you.
Camilla, do you have anything that talks about why Montessori schools are not daycares, and then basically brings about the contrast between daycare, or even, so daycare is one. The second one is what we call the traditional private schools. So how I mean, what is unique about this, and why should they look into this over the other two choices they have, either daycare or just a traditional primary? Do you have anything to that effect?
We have a few infographics, and I think we have a white page, but maybe it might be helpful to do a presentation of some sort, or some type of, I think we have a pamphlet that basically just walks a parent through, if you need a place to leave your child while you're at work and you're not interested in an educational process, then daycare is the better choice. If you're really more concerned about an educational program, then Montessori might be the right choice. And it just kind of does a little compare and contrast with bulleted points to kind of break it down and make it simple. I think we have one of those in the collection, but I think probably I'm trying to think if we have a Montessori one-pager on it. Let me check in the collection. You guys can see my screen, right? So maybe you can see, here are some things that we have on retention, but let me look at the Montessori answered. So we might have this, or we might have it on white papers.
Yeah, I was going to say, we definitely have white papers, like right there at the bottom.
Yeah, here.
Traditional school, what's the difference? But I'm not sure if we have one, and that's a good point about, this one probably touches upon it, but specifically for the younger ages, like pre-kindergarten ages. So Montessori versus,
I'm almost, I feel like a while ago there, I can't remember. Maybe not, but yeah, that would be a great addition. Thank you, Wally. I'm trying to think also if we maybe have it in our Montessori answered one pagers. See, we have importance of the kindergarten year, importance of the 6th grade year.
And not every school, it's, there's similarities, but different pain points of when you tend to lose kids. So, for example, at my school, we used to lose them after 5th grade, and but not kindergarten. Kindergarten was no problem. So, but I can see how there could be different needs based on what your sort of pain points are. Maybe you lose them after primary, and while you want to try to keep them have them enroll in your elementary program. So anyway.
So would a one-page document that basically outlines Montessori versus child or daycare, what's the best option for me? Would that be helpful for you, Wally? To hand out to parents?
Yeah, that would be, well, I'm not sure if I really want to hand it out to the parents, but I want whoever is doing the tours should be able to speak to that up front. And of course, having it available in hard copy is not a bad idea anyway. But yes, that would be helpful, because I want to make sure that when parents come for a tour, right now, we're doing only outside tours, garden tours, what we call it. I think we really need to kind of hit these major points so that they understand before they even enroll. And I think so. I think whoever is conducting the tour, if they have an organized, what we call talking points, make sure they hit all these things. So the one pager and all that, at least for now, would be worthwhile for them to read up on it and make sure they have and incorporate that in their communication.
Yeah. Okay. I'll see if I can get that produced within a few days and send it over your way. And even if you hand it to the person who's giving the tours, maybe they can just reference it and kind of just let parents know there is a difference, so they know what they're getting themselves into. But great. Thank you so much, Wally. All right. And I guess just my last question when it comes to parent education is, how often do you check in with parents, and how do you check in with parent? Do you use like meetings? Do you schedule maybe phone calls, or have an open door policy? How do you check in with families just to make sure that they're okay, they're doing well at your school, they feel content? All right. All right, so moving on from parent education, another topic when it comes to retention is conflicts. We touched a little bit on this when it comes to the pandemic and they're being pushed back. But sometimes, unfortunately, there are conflicts or disagreements, maybe with the Montessori philosophy, maybe with just a teacher that maybe they disagree with, or for some reason. I'd love to hear, have you had to handle any unique conflicts in the past 2 years that have been especially difficult to navigate? This is a safe space to share. We're all in the same boat of Montessori leadership, so somebody may be able to offer advice. I know we've had meetings in the past specifically about conflict, and usually it's one parent, one or two, everyone else is fine, but if you want to share stories or just how you were able to handle difficulties.
I think it's important to note that it's usually one or two, right? And it's those it's the 2% that are very difficult, that take up 90% of your time, unfortunately. So I know your previous conversation or previous question about how do you check in with staff, families and make sure they're okay. I think that unfortunately that has probably not been something we've done enough of, because we've been spending so much time dealing with the parents that are very upset. And I think from the very beginning of the pandemic, we kind of had to say, we know not everyone's going to be on the same page. We know not every family is going to agree with masking or testing or whatever the case may be. Continuing to pay tuition while the school is closed for some period of time because of an COVID case, that sort of thing has become challenging. But I think fortunately, it's been a small portion of the families, and for us, we just had to stick to our values, right? Like we had to say, we've done all the research, and I know you've done research too, and we appreciate that. We appreciate that you feel that you have like your information that is guiding you, but we have to guide ourselves with the information we have. So this is our policy. So children are masked inside, and they've continued to be masked inside the entire time, but we get outside as much as we can so that we have less masking. We actually just started the Test and Save program. Unfortunately, we didn't know about the DESE one in time to get it on board for the fall. So we just started the EEC, like Neighborhood Villages Test and Save process. And I know not all parents have been super excited about testing, and some people have come out that just like, they don't believe in COVID. It's not a thing. You can't make me do this. No, I can't make you, but that's our choice. And so we have, in the past month, lost a few more children than we would have anticipated. And we're trying to backfill those spaces, which is tricky. And it's hard. It's definitely hard when you have parents questioning your morals and whether or not you actually support children and families because of your policy. They make some very pointed and hurtful comments at times, but I think at the end of the day, you have to realize those are the families that we probably shouldn't have in our community to begin with. So it's hard.
Yeah. I just wanted to share at my school, as far as checking in, and our head of school, who is Montessori trained, and so is very astute at observation, obviously, right? And she would go out to carpool. Now, this was the way we did carpool was, parents line up with their cars and we bring the kids out to the car, or in the morning, get them out of the cars. But she would go out and wanted to make eye contact with every parent. And she said I remember her saying this, that it was so amazing how much information she could gather just from saying hello and just kind of having a brief, how are you doing? How are things? Very, very brief. But, if somebody, she could just tell from the body language or whatever, if somebody had something that was not right, or, some animosity or whatever towards the school or her, she obviously could check. And then that was her, yellow flag, like, I need to check in with this person. I need to reach out and say, hey, more than just during carpool, but just, so it's those kind of day-to-day sort of check-ins that parents don't know they're being checked in on, but that you can sort of get the signals of this parent is happy and this parent is not happy, and so you can maybe try to address it before it blows up into something that is a bigger issue. I just wanted to offer that as a maybe a tactic that might, I don't even know. I mean, I haven't been in the school since COVID started, so I didn't even know how we used to just call it carpool, but when, drop off and pick up at the end of the day, how that all transpires. But it used to be where we could kind of just, hi, how are you, to every single parent. And just a great way to check in, just informally and quickly, and just kind of get a quick gauge on how they're doing and how they're feeling about things. So
No, I think that makes sense. I think we did that for a while, and then you kind of get busy and get away from it, or you've got, one of those difficult parents you're talking to at the time of drop off. So you're not out there, but even if it's not every day, but 3 times a week or something, making sure that you've got it in your calendar and nothing can move it. so that it has to happen is very important. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, Michelle. Thank you for for sharing that point. And hopefully, I think you have a good perspective on it. On maybe you don't necessarily want those families in your community. So hopefully that ends up being a good thing. Another point I want to bring up when it comes to conflicts is the issue of fairness, because I think what I've heard from a lot of our previous town halls is that a lot of parents, because of the pandemic, think that they can ask for, oh, well, if my kid's only going to be in class for this many days and you guys keep closing classrooms, then I want a discount on tuition or I want a special price. And then there's conflicts from there. And we've heard a lot of this in our previous town halls. So I just want to kind of ask around, like, what do you do in those situations? What do you do to ensure fairness? And what kind of conversations have you had to have, just so that all parents kind of are on the same boat? Like, there's no special treatment for just one child or one family.
Camilla, I think in our case, we have what we call pandemic parental agreement that they all sign, where we basically specifically state what we'll do when the classroom closes. For example, I mean, if the classroom closes for a few days, then they'll get X% discount. If the toddlers, X% discount, and when we'll be able to offer virtual versus toddlers. Obviously, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have virtual this thing, but we have it laid out very clearly, and the parents sign it. And so that is the document we use to make sure that everybody knows about it and they're enforcing it equally and fairly.
That's great. It's great to have an agreement. It's great to have something that you can also remind parents, like, oh, we had everyone sign an agreement earlier in the year, so please, stand by us and just acknowledge that everyone's going to be on the same boat.
Even for the coming year, the 2022-2023, in addition to our parental agreement, even we do not know what will happen, but we are also having to them sign a parental pandemic agreement also at the same time. And if it becomes irrelevant, that's great. I mean, that's fine. But if it is still going on, then at least we have an understanding and the parents sign it up front moving forward. So that's helpful to some extent. It doesn't solve all the problems. And some people who, we still have had people who have been awfully rude about certain things. Particularly like runny nose. A child has been turned back because they have a runny nose. And I understand it may be just a runny nose, but that's also a sign of COVID, unfortunately. So, but we have had challenges, but at least little things help.
Before we move on from conflicts, are there any other, instances that you'd like advice on? You can get several opinions here, or just any other conflict issues you'd like to discuss. They can be retention related or not. If anything comes to mind later, just pop it in the chat and we'll go back to it. Another issue when it comes to retention is the process of re-enrollment. Keeping re-enrollment simple is important. I think, everyone is super busy, super stressed in the Montessori space and outside of it as well. So I'd love to kind of hear your strategies with how your school handles re-enrollment. Do you have kind of a rolling re-enrollment process? How easy do you make it for parents? And how kind of early on do you need to know that they're going to be re-enrolling so that you know that you need to fill up spaces if necessary? Do you feel that when it comes to re-enrollment, your communication is strong in this area, whether it's, parent reminders or meetings, or you have some type of event to get parents to come together and re-enroll? Obviously, maybe not in person now, but what is your strategy for making re-enrollment easy and accessible for parents?
We were so excited to bring back the Watch Me Work night in January, and our plan was to send out all of the re-enrollment packets right after that, because I think Watch Me Work is just like, as a Montessori parent, watching my 3-year-old give me a lesson on something that he mastered in the classroom was so beautiful. So we wanted to be able to give that to families again. And we couldn't because of COVID. So we didn't feel comfortable in January bringing families back in. So we are honestly terrible at re-enrollment. We've never done it in a timely manner. And we were trying to get ahead of it this year, and kind of COVID put everything on the back burner. And we felt like at a time when our classrooms were being closed was not the time to ask parents to re-enroll at a higher tuition for next year. So we're behind on it. And I don't know, I don't have answers to give to people who are calling now for fall, because I don't know how many spaces we're going to have open. So it's very stressful. But I would just I don't know if anybody else has ideas on anything they did to kind of get parents really just give them that warm and fuzzy feeling that you would have gotten from the Watch Me Work night in a different way, so that they've got that as they're looking over their re-enrollment forms and thinking yes, there's nowhere else I'd want my child to be in the fall than with you guys, because you're doing such a great job. Because I feel like the last 2 months especially have been a very heightened stress time. So it almost feels like the worst time to ask parents to sign up again. So I don't know if other people have things they've done that just to really get, like I said, get parents really excited to re-enroll for the fall. Some of them have already asked, but we've got people that haven't been super excited about COVID shutdowns and paying tuition while we're closed and things like that.
So we at our school, of course, have a toddler, CASA, elementary. So we have different levels and different programs that feed into the move up process. So something in our admissions office that we've been able to offer parents also throughout the year and in anticipation of re-enrollment for the upcoming year are move up tours. So oftentimes our tours are so focused when we onboard the families, but we have now brought the tours back to revisit our current clientele to ensure that we're preparing them for the next transition and what to expect and what some of those preparations are going to look like as they prepare for their child to move up to the next program. So in regards to re-enrollment, we have our senior CASA children, and parents are starting to make the decision whether or not to continue with private education for grade 1. So we hold up those move up tours prior to re-enrollment being released in the early new year. So we catch parents when they're starting to shop around and starting to consider different options. It's a wonderful way to reconnect and really respect that this is going to be a new process for them. And we've been holding it virtually, but traditionally we would welcome them back into the program and give them a tour and focus on the move up program in which their child would be transitioning to.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's a great idea. Doesn't Michelle, I have one more question as well. When it comes to retention. No, we have something in the chat here. Alyssa says, maybe you can try to record a message from the kids to their parents, a video of them working, showing that they like what they're doing at school. Just an idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think videos especially can be really helpful. I know it's hard to have technology in the classroom, whether it's an assistant filming or something like that. But I think Montessori is a visual thing, and to see your child working is very impactful. Michelle, were you able to have any sort of observation this past year, or were you not able to have parents in for classroom observations either?
We haven't had parents in at all. We've been hosting open houses once or twice a month so that parents could come into the classrooms, because some families were enrolled all last year and never set foot in the classroom. So on an open house that's either after hours or on a Sunday, we open the school up so that parents can at least come in and see the space. And there have been some parents that have brought their child in to see it. So that's been nice, but we haven't actually had any parents come in while other children are in the building. I think to do that, we would probably need to verify vaccinations of the parents to feel really comfortable doing that. Mm-hmm. And we just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a difficult conversation to navigate with some people. So it's just difficult in general. There's a lot of there's a lot of opinions out there. What was I going to say? Here we have a comment from Emily. How and when are people doing tours these days? I'm curious. That's a great question. Are people still doing virtual tours mostly? Yes, I see some head nodding.
We bring them to campus. We do tours mostly outdoors because we do have an outdoor classroom space. So I try to schedule them. It's been hard in the last month because of the weather, but I try to schedule a tour when I know the children are going to be outside so they can see the children engaging in the outdoor classroom, but then they can still go inside because there are no children inside. So they can kind of get both aspects of it. I've done virtual tours because I'm on the Cape, so it's very transient. So I have a lot of people like moving from out of area, so I've still done virtual tours when needed, but it is nice to actually have the parent come. And I'd be interested to hear whether people have children come, because we've been trying to go back and forth on that. Again, if we had a vaccinated adult touring without their child, maybe we would bring them in to see the classroom in action inside, but because we always welcome children, we haven't felt comfortable doing that. So they've been outside for the most part, but then we go inside if the class is outside at that time. So I just try to schedule them at the right time of day. Of course, when it's 11 degrees outside, it's harder to know when the children will be outside and for how long. But we're battling whether or not we should continue to allow children on that initial visit so that maybe we could have parents come in if they were able to show proof of vaccination on the tour.
Yeah. We have another comment from Alyssa here in the chat. We're doing both virtual and in-person tours with appointments, and only vaccinated people can come in. When we don't let people go in the classroom, only in the hallways or when the classroom is outside. Okay.
One thing, Michelle, we were pretty strict about not allowing children to come on that first tour, but we always had classroom observation. This is pre-COVID, of course, but because what we found is when they have their own children with them, they just are not focusing on the classroom, because their own child, if they're with them, they're going to want to, participate in the classroom, and and the parents are usually like, be quiet, the parents' attention is diverted. And so I think you might find it's hard because parents have to find childcare or whatever, but the ones who are really interested in your school will figure it out and be able to come without the children. And then of course, if they decide to apply, then they can bring their children to see the school and at that time. But I think it's especially with young, unless of course it's an infant, then they could bring them. But anyway, just wanted to throw that out, that if you're thinking about maybe not allowing young children to come on that first visit, that if it is during a regular school hours, I think that would be a good way to go if you can swing that.
Yeah, it was nice pre-COVID because we would, even with infants, we'd sit down together, and they might engage in morning meeting with the other child. Or I know I had parents say, I enrolled at your school because the children were so welcoming to my child when we came on the visit, and so their child was able to navigate the classroom and have some independence while I talked to that parent. Again, with COVID, we're not allowing all of that to happen, so it probably makes sense to just have the parents come on their own so they can see the magic that happens in the classroom, because without that, it's hard to explain.
That's right. Right.
Thank you.
All right. So if anyone else has any other questions or comments on re-enrollment, or is curious to know any other strategies or on school touring, please feel free to comment. If not, I'll move on to the next topic of re-enrollment. I think it was brought up a little bit on this slide, but it's tuition. The reality is, everything is going up in price. There's rising costs. Staffing is more expensive as well because of everything going on. And tuition raises are necessary moving forward. Unfortunately, when it comes to retention, that creates challenges when you're telling parents that you're raising costs. So I'd like to touch upon this. Has anyone had to deal with tuition increases? How are you communicating with families? How are you explaining that, you need this in order to sustain the value in your Montessori education and the programs that you're providing? Any comments, questions, strategies?
We had to go through this recently when we were doing our re-enrollment, starting January. And because I think this coming year, we raised more than our usual. Normally we raise about 3% a year, the tuition. But this year we raised more than that, almost like 5% plus in some cases. And I was quite worried in terms of not knowing how the parents will react. And the simple explanation was that because of COVID, I think our expenses have gone up, staffing and other expenses have gone up. And even past COVID, we don't see that trend changing. I mean, that'll probably stay at that level. I cannot see that thing going down. And then, by the way, before that, we went and did a survey of the tuition of the schools in our area. Make sure that it will not make us the most expensive school in our area. So we satisfied ourselves that even with this extra increase, we'll still be competitive or below some other schools. So we felt very comfortable. And I'm really surprised that we didn't get a pushback from any parent yet. Hey, this is too much. You increase a lot, this and that. We haven't. I mean, we've been very lucky in that sense. So hopefully, I think there may be no complaints per se yet, and hopefully that will continue.
Yeah, well, that's good. It's good to hear you didn't get any pushback.
A great strategy to show other schools in your area and what their tuition is. If you are kind of in the middle of that range, because parents can see that, the value that you provide and what the relative cost is. One thing we used to do, we're a nonprofit, and our president of our board, we used to have a state of the school meeting right before tuition rates would come out for the following year. And it was a meeting that all parents were welcome to come to. And he would just outline, sort of reiterating how far we've come, all the value of our, that the education provides, and also kind of broke it down really what, how tuition was broken down, like this much goes to salaries, this much goes to maintenance, facilities, whatever. So it just became like, this is where the money is going. This is why tuition is what it is. This is why we have an annual fund, so it just kind of laid it all out. And I think parents just appreciate knowing it's not just this black box, and, oh, tuition's going up, but I don't really know why. I think the more you can just explain, this is why tuition is what it is. And then we always had a chart up of, I think it was maybe half a dozen schools, within commuting distance, and what their tuition rates were that were comparable, schools, so that you could show that we were far less than some and maybe a little bit more than a few others, but that we were not, way out of the ballpark when it came to tuition. So
Camille, the problem is that lately fewer and fewer schools are sharing their tuition information on the website based on the advice from Nido Marketing. Asim had specifically told me that, hey, it's best not. I mean, we used to share our this thing on website, but once we started working with you guys, the advice was, hey, don't do that. You maybe use that to capture the information. So we don't share anymore. It's becoming harder to find out, who's what, doing what, but it used to be a lot more common before.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Still think you should not share your tuition on your website, but I think that, we would call the schools and just ask, what is your tuition for your different levels? I mean, they'll probably share. I mean, it's not like it's a big secret usually. So I wouldn't shy away from doing that.
I find it very awkward. Maybe it is not. I just always felt it quite awkward calling, and not particularly the ones who are around you, right? I mean, I can call somebody who is on the south side of the city or something is okay, but who is maybe 2 miles from you, who's a direct competitor, to call them and say, hey, what do you do here? I mean, that's going to be a little bit awkward conversation. That's the reason we have never done that.
Yeah. 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 I don't have any great advice there other than, you know, I guess, yeah, you don't really want to pose as a prospective parent either. That's a little bit under the under the table, but fair point. But I think that, you know, the information that you can glean from some websites is probably useful. They just haven't evolved marketing wise as much as you have, Wally.
No, there is a point of actually not sharing and basically getting them to share your contact information. I think I see the value of that. That definitely is a good point. So, but I've seen that, I mean, compared to 5 years ago or fewer and fewer schools, there is still a few schools who share that on the website, but a lot of them don't anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing, though, I think, what just comes to mind is if they're nonprofits, then they have to publish an annual report, and chances are their tuition is probably public information there, if you can find their annual report or something like that.
That's a good point.
Are there any other ideas, comments, questions on tuition? Before we move on, I think we have one more retention slide.
We're almost up to the hour anyway here, so.
Yeah, the last one we kind of brushed upon already a little bit, just that third year. What do you have in place for that kindergarten year, that last year of lower elementary, I feel like that since we move in 3-year cycles, those are the kind of points where it becomes difficult to hold on to the children. So, oh, I see. Is there any issues with the third year? And I see I deleted the wrong slide. But yeah, what do you do to ensure that families stay for that last third year in the 3-year cycle? If anything. We do have a few, like I said, I want to visit the collection because we do have a few things specifically designed for this, as well as our email nurtures here. Here we go. Yeah. We have a few email nurtures here that are specifically designed for that third year. The importance of the kindergarten year email nurture, the upper elementary, like transition to the upper elementary, Montessori, primary to elementary email nurture. Email nurtures are a great way to just educate parents that doesn't exhaust your staff. And then I also want to reference our retention section here. We have a few things here: the importance of the kindergarten year slideshow presentation, why the third year, and information on the kindergarten year presentation. We have 2, and also some great previous town hall recordings specifically on this retention issue. All right. Do we have another slide? Yeah, here we go. This is the one I wanted. All right. I'd love to hear your final takes on retention. Anything. Hopefully you guys took away some good strategies, some ideas, or just were able to find some support in this group. It's nice to have these intimate groups sometimes. So thank you. Any final questions? I know we're just 2 minutes over the hour.
I apologize for hogging the conversation today in session. I didn't mean to. I think I used a lot of your time. I apologize for that.
Wally, no need to apologize. We welcome those who come and speak up and and participate. So that's why we have open forums. It's good to kind of have a place to talk. So thank you.
Something our admissions office has found quite helpful is also now with all the wonderful tools of technology, in order for us to know what is our lifetime value of our students. So really looking back and tracking enrollment and seeing how long are we keeping children over the history of time that we're running our schools. And it's important to note, to see the time of enrollment, the time of withdrawal. Are we keeping them for those 3 years, and really to evaluate how long our children are staying and what we need to do to better improve their experience or work alongside parents to ensure they're having that 3-year program cycle. So of course that's changed due to the pandemic, and that's been shortened because parents were affected with some other external factors in their decision making, but we found that quite useful to see how we are retaining students over the years as well.
That's great. In the chat, great, from Emily, great idea. All right. Before we wrap up, I just want to say next week, we're going to be meeting at the same time. You can use the same link to register that you did for this session. We're going to be joined by Zara Majid. She's going to be sharing her team building and leadership development strategies specifically for Montessori school leaders. She's a great school leadership consultant, so we're excited to hear from her expertise. So if that's a topic that interests you, we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to close our screen here. Thank you so much for joining our town hall. And I hope that everyone kind of had a good space to talk, connect, find support. And as for Emily and Wally, I'll email you the retention resources that were mentioned earlier. All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good rest of your day.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.